Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Dungeon Crawl podcast. It's been a little bit. It's in one of those times. I had this plan. I had this written like 2 weeks ago, and then one thing led to another, and I just was never able to get to sit down in front of the camera and the microphone and get this thing recorded. So I apologize for the brief respite. But that's kind of the way these episodes are going nowadays. We're just kind of pumping them out whenever I'm able to. I have another idea planned that I'm looking forward to. That'll take me a few weeks, I think, to fully prep it and write it and get going with it. So I might have to table that one for a little bit, or maybe I'll just do some research for a couple weeks and come back with it. Though I didn't do research for this one for a couple weeks. And I do want to go ahead and apologize to the video watchers here on YouTube because you might not be able to notice it, but you might be able to notice it. I got into a fight right here. You can see my lip is just split. No, that's not true. There were no fights. There were no punches thrown. This is, I had some weird, pimples or, cold sore. I don't know exactly what it was on my lip. And then that started healing, and then it's split like 2 or 3 times since it started healing. Just because, when you talk, when you eat, your lips expand, and so it cracks and breaks. I'm probably saying way too many details, and I'm probably grossing out a lot of the listeners, so I apologize in advance. Or I guess I apologize after I said it, so it's not in advance. Regardless, here I am, ready to record, ready to go. This is going to be probably a short episode as my guess. After I was writing it and looking over some of the details, I noticed it was probably going to be a little shorter, but I still think it's an important thing to discuss. We've talked about one-shots before on the podcast, but I wanted to revisit the one-shot idea because I'll be running a one-shot pretty soon. And it's my first time playing D&D in like a year-ish. So I'm very excited. Also nervous, but we've kind of discussed that in the last couple episodes about refining your passion and why I love DMing. Really, those are 2 very selfish podcasts about myself. So this is going to be a little bit not about myself. It's about one-shots. Those of you who don't know what a one-shot exactly is, it's a term used very, very liberally for playing a tabletop RPG. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be a TTRPG, but 9 times out of 10, I've heard it referred to in tabletop RPG circles. And the session itself is isolated from a greater story. It's a one-shot, one and done. A self-contained story for the most part. There are often, these are often the type that you can go buy on DriveThruRPG, DMsGuild, stuff like that. I mean, I have a couple one-shot things behind me. There's one I have, can't see it right now. It's called Tome of Dungeons or something like that. If I was smart. Oh, here we go. I was smart, but got it ahead of time. It's called Mini Dungeon Tome, published by AAW Games. Over 130 adventures for the 5th edition. I think they also have a Pathfinder version of it, but it's literally is. If you're on the video, you'll be able to see it. If not, I'm sorry. But it literally is on each page, left and right. So it's a full spread page, I guess. It has a dungeon. It has brief history of it, and then has all the rooms of the dungeon, and that's literally it. Every page is a whole new dungeon. And so these are basically one shots. You could pull up one of these and knock it out. Go all the way from level 1 to level 20. So you're good to go. I mean, that's more than what WotC does. It even takes you all the way. Has pre-generated characters on the back. So if you really just want to bust this out, you got a bunch of friends over, and they're like, "Hey, what's D&D? Hey, here you go. Boom, pre-generated characters," and you can go through a quick one shot. Those would probably take you in 2 hours max, maybe 3 or 4, depending on how long it takes. These are typically meant to be finished, not these specifically, but one shots are typically meant to be finished in a single session. Hence the term one shot. It's a one and done. But that very rarely happens, in my understanding. I think in some instances, it doesn't matter if you finish it in one session and you can string a series of quote-unquote one-shots together to finish it up. Then I guess it's not technically a one-shot, but it doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's a term used very rarely. occasionally, this is what I tend to do, is I'll cut out certain aspects of the one shot of the quest to finish in an allotted time, whether this be because we're playing at a local game store or just so, this is a time where all your friends can meet. And so, you're like, all right, so we don't want to have to reschedule this. Let's just knock a couple, take a couple things out. You don't necessarily tell the players, hey, I just cut out half of the quest because they're taking too fucking long. No, you just kind of do it on the back end. I did this once. We were doing Oath of the Frozen King as a quick one shot. That's published by, I can't remember who it's published by. I got it behind me too, but I don't want to look behind me anymore. I'm sick of doing that. But it's called Oath of the Frozen King. It's very quick and easy to run. But there were 2 rooms that we just did not have the time to get to because I spent a lot of time. We weren't planning on doing a one shot that day. But one thing led to another, and we weren't able to do our normal campaign because I think 1 or 2 people were missing. But everyone else was there. So let's make a game. So they made characters while I figured out what I was going to do for a one shot. And I had to cut out 2 whole rooms because we just did not have the time. And it was not necessarily, did not add or change anything to the greater plot. It was fine. They hardly noticed. So there are many different reasons why you should run one shots. They can be handled in very different ways. They can be like a momentary release from the campaign or story, like filler in an anime or a show or something. But think of it as filler, but in a good way, in a fun way. Because filler usually has a bad connotation, like, oh, dude, that episode was just straight filler, terrible, learn nothing. So what you want to do, and I'm going to kind of give you some examples here a little bit later on ways you can make those one shots interesting and fun to do, not just stupid filler. But let's talk about why you would run one first. I think the most obvious one, like I already mentioned, is when players are missing. You don't have everyone that showed up. I think it's the most common instance of running a one shot. That and the next one I'll mention. Because scheduling can be very difficult to rein down with a bunch of busy adults. So keeping to a set schedule and not canceling when 1 or 2 people can't make it is a good way to still have fun with your friends, because that's what D&D is all about, what meeting up with everyone is all about, while also adhering to your schedule. Because if you cancel 1 week, oftentimes, in my experience, that bleeds into the next week, and then bleeds into the next week. And then it's so much easier to keep canceling D&D. So if you can still schedule it and still make sure it happens, even if you're not playing the main campaign, you guys are just meeting up and having fun. That way, everyone still knows, okay, so we're not canceling, even if one person misses. And that way, you also can create a little sense of FOMO, in a way, fear of missing out. So your players don't want to miss out. They want to come. They want to have fun. To incentivize everyone to, make sure this is the day of the week that we're all coming to play D&D together and just enjoy our time together. This is also, you can use this instead of playing D&D. You could run a short game in a different system, like a Morkborg or a Mouse Ritter, or a completely different tabletop game. Like you could play Eldritch Horror or a Guildmaster or Monopoly, Trouble. You can pull out some of the classics, Twister. That's not a tabletop game, but I mean, why not, right? It's a good way to get to know your friends a little better. So you don't feel like you have to be stuck just to D&D. There's a lot of different tabletop games out there. I mean, you could go to a local game store, an LGS, go to a place that has games you can play for like a flat price, like you pay $5-10 to get in the door, and there's a whole wall of games you can peruse and play with your friends. Go there one of those days, find out a couple different games you guys like, and then you can purchase those, or you can just go to that place every time you want to play something that's not D&D. Some options. Which leads into the next reason you could run a one shot, just for fun. Or at a local game store. Some people like going to LGSs when there's a D&D night. Like I know one of my local ones has one. I think it's every Sunday, maybe Saturday, maybe Friday. It's one of the weekend days. I know for sure. I remember I went once and I was buying a miniature or something, maybe a couple miniatures. They have very cheap miniatures here, so that's usually where I end up buying my minis. And I remember the guy was like, "Hey, so you playing D&D? You a DM? Are you a player?" I mean, since I was buying a lot of minis, he was probably like, "This guy's a fucking DM, right? There's no way this guy's just a player buying a bunch of goblins or skeletons and stuff." And I said, "Yeah, I'm a DM. I've been DM for a couple of years. It's a lot of fun. I have a great time with it." He said, "Hey, he kind of like tapped this sign that had D&D nights. It's usually Adventurers League. but I'm sure you can kind of run your own thing if you wanted to. It's probably easier to do an Adventurers League, or you can bust out a one shot. But they actually pay you with the a game store credit, and you can use that to obviously buy more minis or whatever the hell. So some game stores have stuff like that, or players will just show up and you get drafted into certain games. But the other option is just play for fun, right? You're not at a local game store. You're not just deciding to run it from random people. It can be a way to break up in between stories, to break up the pace of the main campaign. Like, you just reach the end of a big arc. You're like, all right, you know what? Instead of diving into the next one, let's just take a quick respite, and we'll, Joe's always running D&D. You're running D&D for us. How about Craig? But maybe Shelly to check it out, It's a way for the forever DM to take a rest and let a different player run the group through a couple games or two. We have a friend, Kenneth. He's been on the podcast a few times. His group used to do, I don't think they still do, but his group used to have this thing where they'd run one arc. Kenneth would be running the game, and then when they reached the end of that arc, another player would pick up. Like, there were two campaigns kind of running simultaneously. It's a little different than running a one shot, right? But it's the same, similar idea to taking a break between one shots, or taking a break between a campaign. So the DMs can take breaks and create stuff, not constantly having to be on and make stuff the next game, next week. So yeah, that could be fun. I mean, again, it's literally just for fun, where you're just deciding to run a one shot for some people, or like I said, one of your players will say, hey, I've been really wanting to try out DMing. Looks like a lot of fun. And then they try it and absolutely hate it, or absolutely love it. And then they leave your game and create their own game, or they make a separate game. Who knows? Lots of options. That's definitely a reason why you could start running some one shots. Another one I was thinking about is like a prelude or a prologue type of thing. Like an intro to a full-on campaign. I think this works better if you've at least communicated to the players ahead of time, so not completely caught off guard that whatever they're playing is going to directly lead into the campaign ahead of time. I kind of did this when we were thinking about doing the Dungeon Chronicles. I don't know how many of you guys were able to catch that stream live. But the basic idea was, it was a separate one shot. We were testing microphones, testing different things, seeing if everything all worked well together. And I was running the players through a one shot to test, my own abilities and seeing how it felt, and with cameras and stuff. And the players didn't know. I didn't communicate this ahead of time, but at the end, I alluded to, had a little narration of some being in their heads, that this was not an isolated one shot, that this would at least have teasers into the greater story. Some official material that makes me think of this is like Death House for Curse of Strahd. It's not necessarily a prologue, it doesn't directly tie into the story. And if you were to do this, I would try to incentivize tying into the story a little bit more than Death House does. And if it does, I could just be completely forgetting, and maybe Death House does respond or tie in more to Strahd than I directly remember. If I recall, it's mainly just to get the players used to the themes and the play style of Curse of Strahd, less than the actual tying into Strahd itself. Matthew Colville also did this with his live play that he was doing for a while. I don't think he's still doing the live play, but I think it was called The Chain. And the first session, and he had communicated this to the players, I believe, ahead of time. And the first session was basically this big plot point about the players were trying to kill this king or this lord. I can't remember exactly the basic premise. But it was to show how powerful this corrupt, terrible leader is, this god almost in a way. Because he decimated and destroyed and killed, I think, all the party members except for one. And he'd had the players create retainers. If you want to learn more about retainers, you can check out Matthew Colville's stuff. MCDM, I believe it's in Kingdoms and Warfare, that book. But they're basically retainers are sidekicks. You can go send your character, them off to go do stuff while you're doing different things. And if you die, then you can become your retainer. And so the players then became the retainer, except for one of the characters. One of the characters stayed alive and they brought everyone together and said, hey, we gotta avenge our friends and stuff like that. It's kind of a cool intro to showing the players a little bit about the world. And it wasn't really a one-shot, it really was the beginning of the campaign, but you could do something similar in your own games. You also think of it like how prologues for books and movies are. I could totally see a one-shot for the intro, the Lord of the Rings, setting up the importance of the One Ring, all the other rings that existed, but then there was the One Ring and Sauron, and maybe the players all get killed by Sauron or something, something intense like that. It's like, no, this guy's a bad son of a bitch, be careful with this guy. To set up the stakes that are at head, and then maybe the world that they're in, instead of exactly Lord of the Rings, but maybe you're fighting like this big bad, like Sauron, and they all die, and they're like the last bastion of hope. But since they all died, Sauron, or the equivalent of, now rules the kingdom. And that's where the campaign begins. Is like hundreds of years later, where this world is now ruled by this guy, and so that way they kind of know the stakes and how powerful this guy is, really. I would say this is also probably a lot more railroady than a typical one-shot, though I would say one-shots are inherently railroady because there's a set story that has to happen from point A to point B. Of course, there's some wiggle room, but the way one-shots are written, there's it's a full writing, and it shows the beginning, the middle, the end. So it's tough to really get out of that. Like if it takes place on an island, if the players leave the island, the one-shot's over. So you have to have some buy-in from the players to be like, all right, we're not going to go fuck with the story too much. We're going to stick to what the DM's putting in front of us, which if you have a good party, they'll be doing that already. But this type of one-shot is more railroady than typical because if you're building into the campaign you've already created or already have thought about in your head, Sauron's going to kill the entire party, right? So you kind of have to, or maybe one of them lives and you can change your, maybe this one character has created this like bastion of hope somewhere else in the world, whatever. You can have some wiggle room, but for the most part, if you're setting all the players up for failure, that might not sit great for some people. So you, again, have to have that communication with the players. That's why it's so important if you're doing this type of one shot. And to me, the final is probably some more, and please, I'll say this again later, but please, if you have your own ideas on why you run one shots, or maybe some one shot stories you got down below, your favorite one shot you ever ran, whatever, either comment in the YouTube down below or hop into the Discord to listener comments and send it in there. We'll get some conversations going because I'd love to hear some one shot ideas or your favorite one shot, maybe your worst one shot. Lots of options there. Just tell me about one shots and what they mean to you. But the final one I was thinking about is a test group. You could run a one shot or a couple to feel out a new group of players before you embark on a multi-year long journey with them. You don't want to get a year and a half into a campaign and be like, oh, okay, well, I wish we'd had done a one shot because I would have realized early on, I don't like playing with this guy, And it's still tough to tell in a one shot if you really all get along well. You don't want to, say, okay, well, we didn't really get along well this one shot. Let's just not play. Unless it's something really serious. I mean, you'll learn early on. You just don't mesh well. But it's a good way to just start slightly feeling out party cohesion and start to become more comfortable together, especially if it's a lot of people you don't know. Maybe you all met on Reddit or on Discord or at a local game store. You played one time together. You passed by each other. Now you're coming into someone's house, and it's a whole different experience. So it's a way to get a little more comfortable with each other, get less anxious about meeting new people before you're asked to RP more intensely in a full-on campaign. Because one-shots has some RP here and there, but it's not like you're RPing super intensely and your character's not super invested into the world. You don't have like a whole family out there. It's just a one-shot. It's fairly isolated. You could also use a one-shot as a way to introduce new players to a system. Let's say you've never had people that play D&D. Okay, well, let's play D&D. Let's do a quick one-shot. And I'll help you figure it out. Or Morkborg, or Mouse Ritter, or Pathfinder. A lot of options. And if people haven't played it before you do set up a multi-year long campaign, do a one-shot, see if they at least like the basic idea of the system. Again, in a one-shot, you're not going to feel out every single mechanic, every single option at your disposal. But if you like the mechanics to an extent, you like the basics, like how things are, how combat happens, how outside of combat happens, then yeah, let's continue. Let's do a full campaign together. I could also see as a DM testing new mechanics like homebrewed mechanics in a one shot before bringing it into the main story, and see if it's something that interests, or even themes. See if those themes are something that's interesting to the players. Like if you've only ever done super happy fun, jokes 24/7 kind of D&D, and you've been thinking, I kind of want to do something a little different. I want maybe some horror elements or some spy elements, some thriller elements. I don't know how they're going to take it. You could just communicate and ask them, say, hey guys, I kind of want to shift a little bit and add some more serious stuff to our campaign. What do you guys think? Or you could do a one shot, say, hey guys, this session, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Let me know if you think, let me know if you like it. Let me know what you think. And if they like it, you could say, all right, hey, I noticed we really had a lot of fun with this session. I think I'm going to incorporate some of these ideas into the full story. Thoughts? Your thoughts? So those are the reasons why you could run a one shot. Now I'm going to toss out some ideas on different ways to run these one shots. The first thought that came to my mind is something that I love doing whenever we do one shots for my stories, even if I'm doing like one from the mini dungeon tome or one I bought from DMsGuild. I love tweaking it, and I just use them as inspiration. I'll tweak it and change it to tell a story that existed in the history of the world that my players are playing in. So throughout the world building process and throughout gameplay and the campaign, I mention stuff that happened in history, and you likely will as a DM. Events and moments that have happened in the history in your world's past. And sometimes the player's like, wow, that sounds really cool. That's really interesting. So if an opportunity comes up to do a one shot, maybe pick one of those ideas. Pick one of those big historical events that have happened in your world. Maybe ones have less history, like it's so far back, there's less things written about it. So it doesn't have to be super railroady. And you can tie in to the greater campaign or just fill in some details. Like maybe the players that your characters choose and like they create, maybe they die, maybe they don't die. And later on in the actual campaign, you like in a history book, the players read about one of the characters from that one shot. That could be really fun, really interesting to make the players feel like they made an impact on the world. I think the only couple one shots that I've done in my for my players have been history-based one shots. I had another idea for one that was going to take place like a prison break, like an important prison break that happened. That was only alluded to briefly, but it would have been a lot of fun, I think, to experience and go through. So definitely consider this as something you could pull from. And this way, it's also easier to think of as a DM. Hey, I have no idea what we're going to do this week. I know we're missing one of our players, maybe two of our players, but we still want to play some D&D. Okay, but this event happened in my past in D&D, not in my past life. Yeah, that could be a fun way to quickly get some idea and some inspiration for what you're going to create. You could also tell a different perspective to the current campaign. And what I mean by that is, while the party is going through and saving the world from evil forces, fighting big bads, big bosses, there may be another group of individuals, likely much lower level, though, yeah, maybe on par level, probably not, unless I'm kidding. So there may be another group of individuals, I'm thinking likely lower, that are helping out the locals from, goblin attacks or gnolls or wolves or maybe something slightly bigger and scarier than that. But things the party have grown above from now. When you first start playing D&D in a current campaign, you're fighting gnolls and goblins and orcs and whatever the hell, small fodder. Rats, giant spiders, stuff like that. Once you hit a certain level, that's just not in your radar anymore. Someone else can take care of that. And that's where this comes in. So you can play a different perspective to the current campaign. Maybe you're like in a warring kingdoms. There's two kingdoms that are fighting against each other in a long war. And then the main campaign is taking place in the Southern Kingdom. Well, you decide to do a one shot in the Northern Kingdom, and you can get perspectives and show the players just a little bit of historical kind of meta background to what this place is like and how it's, maybe not too different from where you are, or the propaganda that exists in the North that is different in the South, stuff like that. It could be really interesting. Just let the players see this different perspective and also see the impact of what their actions have done. And it's like maybe this other party is hearing about the exploits of the other campaign's party, about how oh my God, these guys are so awesome. I can't wait for them to sign my novel, my manuscripts, my cow, who knows? So another way you could do a one-shot, as I kind of already mentioned it, but the multi-shot, the multi-campaign, the mini-campaign. This just basically looks like you're doing a one-shot, but you didn't have enough time, or it's a mini-campaign. So I guess someone recommended to me the Critical Role Calamity, I think it was called, or I can't remember. But it's basically, it's like that. It's a mini-campaign. It was like 8 sessions and maybe 9 sessions. And so you know it's going to be shorter, and it could even be, again, historical. You can combine some of these ideas together, right? But it's going to take longer than a one shot, and it's something for fun, but it's going to be something really cool and interesting, and you had this idea, but it's not going to be a full campaign because it's not possible for you to extend it to 20 sessions or 50 sessions. So the players know ahead of time, hey, it's going to be a mini campaign. I'm thinking about making it, 5, 10 sessions. And this is a good way for maybe a new DM to test things out as well. So they like DMing a slightly longer campaign than a one shot. I also like the idea of making themed one shots. I think people do this a lot. I know another one of my friends, Jamie, she does this where I think she ran like a Christmas or a Halloween one shot. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, a couple years ago. But yeah, you can make these specific holiday themes, like Santa's in one, Krampus maybe. You're going to Halloween Town, or there's lots of different fun options. You'd run this specifically on Halloween, or specifically around Christmas, or specifically around Thanksgiving, whatever holiday you can think of. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one shot. Like I remember we did actually I think in our last campaign we did 2 Halloween theme, quote unquote, themed sessions. It just so happened that one of them they were traveling, and I decided to make it. They were going through like a creepy village with a Wendigo. The Wendigo kept copying their voices. And it was made a really creepy, spooky session. And then another time, I think they were in the Shadowfell around Halloween. And so I put up a bunch of candles and made it spooky and dark. And that was a lot of fun too. So another option you could do as well is like side stories. That's what Critical Role has done with their one shots they did for campaign 1. I think they've done some with campaign 2 as well. I'm actually not positive on that. But like they did like Grog Search, or Search for Grog, or like some weddings and stuff like that. Those also can be viewed as like epilogue-y in a way, where it's after the campaign's ended and there's a couple loose threads here and there. So you're like, okay, so it's been maybe a year or 2, or maybe not even a year or 2, maybe in between campaigns. Like, hey, I know we never got to finish one of these characters' arcs, or they missed out on finding their family or something. That seems pretty big, but maybe it wasn't big to the players at the time. Like, hey, you never found your mom. I was thinking maybe we could do like a one shot or a series of one shots to go find your mom, if that's something you'd be interested in. Or maybe the players bring it up to your attention. Like, oh yeah, you know what, that's a great idea. Or in between campaigns, because it could take some time after you finish one campaign to fully prepare for the next one. You can kind of plan that in between. That could be a lot of fun. And the final little thing to think about is you could ask the players afterwards if you want this to be canon or not. You could even like have them play as their characters, their characters from the main campaign, and afterwards, like, did this really happen? Or maybe have them wake up afterwards and a Fey Lord, like they're in the Feywild, and a Fey Lord is making them dream and have crazy stuff. There's lots of powerful options and things you can do for one shots. It's not as limiting as it might sound. It's really limitless. It's actually the opposite of limited. It's limitless. You can do whatever you want with a one shot. Really, it comes down to communicating with your players ahead of time, letting them know what you're thinking, what they're thinking. Like I said, you can go to DMsGuild. There's lots of one shots out there that exist. I mean, even like Candlekeep and some of the other newer D&D official books, those are just like a series of one shots. So one shots are very popular, and you can very much use one shots as you can use these one shots that exist in Mini Dungeon Tome or on DMsGuild as inspiration for quests in your own game. They might not even be one shots, but it's like, you know what? I really like this DMsGuild thing I found here. I'm going to incorporate that as a quest line into my game. Perfect. Boom. Do it. Or I'm going to take a quick break and do a one shot based around that as well. a lot of options. I don't do one shots too often because I love just sticking with the main campaign. But like I said, I'll be running one soon. In like a week or so. Maybe we'll talk about how that went. Maybe I panicked and had a terrible time, or maybe it was an incredible experience. I'll keep you updated. So yeah, hop into the Discord. Mention down below what you like about one shots, what you hate about one shots, what your favorite or least favorite one shot were. And maybe I'm also interested if anyone's ever played at local game stores, what those experiences were like, because I can't imagine myself ever doing like an adventure league or kind of thing. I can maybe see myself running a game for random people that I don't know. I know Kenneth does that. He has a great time doing it. He does it for work, so but he loves doing it. Yeah, so hop into Discord, comment below. Let me know anything about one shots, your thoughts, everything. I will try to do an episode next week. I'm not positive. The idea that I have, it might take me a little more time to fully prep up for it. But I'm definitely interested in this idea. If not, I'll try to think of something else. I'll try to keep you guys updated. Thanks for being patient. Thanks for still listening to the podcast, even though there's weeks and breaks in between. I hope you enjoyed the new format, and I know it's a little different than you might be used to, but you guys are still listening to it in droves, so I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Stay frosty, folks. It's a weird sign off. Sorry.